All right, welcome to another Spring Office Hours. I'm your host, Dan Vega, joined by my good friend and colleague, DaShaun. How you doing, DaShaun?
I'm wonderful. I'm recharged, rejuvenated. Things are great. Yeah, things are great.
Yeah, recharged. It's good to be. We were both you're in Kansas City all the time, but we were both in Kansas City last week. And I was just telling you before the show started, I'm finally kind of done with conference season. It's been a long few months here. And I feel like now I just have I could take a big deep breath and catch up on some things. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yes, indeed. What's top of mind for you right now?
Kansas City. What a conference that was. And that was my first time in Kansas City. So great food, obviously. Had some good barbecue. Great conference. I think the organizers did a really great job with it. There was just a ton of people there. It was nice to be back at a conference, like a big conference, right? I think they said there was over 1,600 people there. And just so many great speakers and attendees and great hallway talks. And I got to see so many friends that I haven't seen in forever. I got to meet people that I haven't met in person before. It was just great. So really great conference. And, I had a session there that went really well. So I was happy with that.
It
How about you?
felt like a much, I'm from Kansas City. So that conference, it's always kind of been there. But this year, for me, it felt like it was a much bigger conference than it's ever been before. It felt super packed, tons of tracks, tons of great content. Yeah, it was a very, very impressive experience.
I will say too, though, I was very cognizant that as great of a conference as it wasn't really a Java and Spring focused conference. A lot of the bigger sessions were C#, .NET, JavaScript, but the Java tracks, the cloud tracks, they got some good attendance. So
it was a developer conference.
It was a developer conference, right?
It was a developer conference, and I don't know of a lot of conferences that do try to pull that off.
Right.
Multiple
It's
languages
tough.
present, not like a focus on product A or product B or language A or B. There's something for everyone.
You have to have, one, a lot of people there, and then two, a really great selection of speakers and diverse speakers. So yeah, that was great. And our coworker and I, Nate and I, got to do a talk. So that was fun. That was the first time we ever got to give a talk together. And we did it on spring recipes, common solutions to common problems. And so we ended up creating 2 hours of content in this slide deck. And then when we finally got to go rehearse through it, we're like, wow, we have wasted way too much content here, which is a good thing. I always like having too much than too little, because it's easier to cut stuff than it is to add stuff. So when we finally went through it, we're like, all right, here are the things that we want to do. I mean, the pros that we ended up hitting it right on an hour. So that was really great.
Sitting in the front row for that session, I kept on thinking that would be great for this type of audience, right?
Yep.
We've been doing Spring for a long time, but over the course of thinking about that content, you and I both learned some things along the way. Like,
Yep.
oh,
Yep.
it's something that we forgot. And yes, it's magic. It does amazing things. It's super
Right.
powerful. But sometimes it's nice to be reminded about these
Yeah.
things, and might be nice to like, yeah, here's a recipe. Here's something that you
Yep.
get in the Spring ecosystem that it's easy, it's powerful, it makes sense,
Hmm.
and it provides a lot of value. This is something that we
And,
could probably fit into here.
and we said it, I think, a few times during that presentation, which was like, I have to keep reminding myself that things that are second nature to me are like, hey, I know exactly where to go look. And even to a lot of people in the audience, like, this might be a simple solution. You might know how to solve this already, but there's probably someone there who didn't know that. And so when you kind of speak to general audiences like that, you have to remember that. And so we had a wide range of like, here's the most basic thing we could think of, like using the Spring Initializer, to some of the things that are coming in Spring Framework 6 and Spring Boot 3. So yeah, it was fun.
So I'm gonna throw out a question to the audience: is anybody using Spring Boot and not using start.spring.io? Feel free to drop a comment in there. Let us know, how do you create your Spring Boot projects? How do you create your Spring projects? What are you using to bootstrap things
I know
if you're not using start.spring.io?
we used to copy a previous project over and change a whole bunch of things, and that was how we bootstrapped a new project. So I hope people aren't still doing that. I hope we've evolved from that.
Yeah, we're we're in a really, really interesting place. The other part of what we do, and I think that we heard quite a bit of this at KCDC, is the idea that you can bring your questions, right? You have a lot of places to go for information, and
Mhm.
there's a lot of things, but sometimes hearing the same thing, even hundreds of times,
Yep.
sometimes it just takes the right phrasing, the right metaphor, the right analogy to make something click. And that's one of the things we want to provide here is
The
bring
right
your questions. Like,
messenger.
what are you stuck with? Like, why does it do this? And how do I make that work? That's what we're
Yeah.
here for.
You know me too. I've said this a million times now, but there are no unique messages, only unique messengers. So
Mm.
there's one way to do things, and it may not click the first 10 times, but that 11th person may have described it to you in a way that you go, oh, yeah, that makes sense now.
Yes, indeed. Pet, thanks for joining us. I hope I said that
Totally.
right.
Yeah.
15
Hey,
year.
I'm a Java developer, 15 years, and I love Spring Boot. You're a Java developer 15 years old, or you've been doing this for 15 years? Those are
Uh,
two both impressive things.
yeah. Funky Waddle is a wonderful longtime friend from Twitch. Thanks for joining us. Funky Waddle is new. He's getting into this whole open source ecosystem, and he's getting excited about it. He's fun to watch. He's got passion.
Cool. Do you want to get on with the show then? Do you want to
Yeah,
start with what we
let's
always do? So,
yeah,
if
let's
you're
jump
new to
in.
the
Let's see what's
show,
going on.
we have a few things here. Kind of how we want to go through this show is we start with some of what's new in the community. So, we'll take a look at the calendar. We'll take a look at the kind of Tanzu Developer Center, look at the blog and see what's going on there. Just talk about some of the things that are kind of new for us or things that are current for us. And then we'll get into any demos we may want to show off. I actually have one from KCDC that I'll show off. And then we have time for questions. So the biggest thing here is if you have questions about things that you're running into, problems you're trying to solve, that's what we're here for. We're here to kind of talk about those and see if we can't find a solution to those. And if we can't, DaShaun and I know all the smart people, so we can find somebody to answer that question.
I don't know how to phrase it up best, but we're here for you, right? I like the way Josh says it. However he says it, he says, doesn't matter what else goes on. We are here in service of you. And if you've got questions, you're stuck on something, you're not asking us, we're here for you. That is your fault. Bring your questions. Let us know where you're stuck, and we'll do our best to help you.
Cool. So this is one thing we like to start off with. So calendar.spring.io. If you did not know about this is kind of public out there, letting you know there's so many different projects in the Spring world. This kind of tells you what's happening in the Spring world. What are the releases going on? you get this nice calendar view. You can switch over to a list view if you like. I like this calendar view because it shows us here we are Tuesday the 16th. And it kind of shows you what's going on this week. So yesterday we had a bunch of spring security updates. Today, I know this is one of your favorite topics, DaShaun, spring authorization server.
And I'm wondering, I feel like, didn't we already see that announcement? Did that go out
Yeah, I thought the
already?
1.0, so the 1.0 milestone 1, I was looking at this, and I think part of this is there is Spring Boot 3 support in here. So I think maybe, I don't know what's going on. 1.00 milestone 1. Did 1.0 already get released, or was that a
I feel
0.
like it did.
Yeah, I
I feel like it
thought
did.
so.
But I could be wrong. But I think it did.
But
But
that's,
still,
I know, like I
lots of
said, I
stuff.
saw the issue in there. I know that they're adding Spring Boot 3 support. So I know, like, at some point we're getting closer to Spring Boot 3, Spring Authorization Server, and every other project,
Wait,
is
what's
trying to get.
Spring Boot 3?
Oh, this really great project that is coming later this year with a whole bunch of new features to align with Spring Framework 6, move us on to Java 17, Jakarta E9. Yeah, a whole bunch of really great features that hopefully we'll start talking about more and more. We have a lot already, but as
Yes.
we get closer
Spring Framework
to
6, Spring Boot
November,
3 will be GA later this year. And I can't be the only one. It's a big part of what I get excited about. It's a big part of
yep.
why I even wake up in the morning, is because I know that there's so much magic coming, and I'm excited. It's almost like Christmas. There's anticipation of what's coming, and yeah, and it has me excited. Uh, Haseen, thank you for joining. And he's asking, what's the best resources to learn Spring Foundation? We hear it all the time. Like, how do I get
Yeah,
started? What's the best way? I've got a strong opinion, and in fact, I actually just shared it on Twitter. I think yesterday. Uh,
nice.
there's a handful of books, but the best place to start is, I think, at spring.io. It's the official source. That's where you can find docs, quick starts, tutorials, guides. There's a ton of content there. And from there, there's a handful of books that I'm a big fan of. They're mostly Spring Boot centric. The first one is Cloud Native Java from Josh Long and Kenny Bastani. The other is Spring Boot Up and Running from Mark Heckler. And then Josh's latest book is Reactive Java. And then also the Tanzu Developer Center. All great resources that kind of can show you, like, from start to finish, how to get an application up and running, and you learn along the way. I think the best way to learn is getting reps, and there are, like I said, tons of guides, tons of examples to help you along your way. And if you get stuck with anything, if you get going on anything, or you say, hey, I went down this resource or this guide and it didn't make sense to me, let us know. Because not only can we help you maybe understand it better, but we can also maybe go to the source and see if we can improve that guide for you. So let us know.
Hey, that's us. Spring Office Hours is streaming live now. So
Yes.
yeah, there's guides over on spring.io. There's also guides on the TNZ Developer Center. As DaShaun said, there's a whole bunch of content here on the TNZ Developer Center, like guides, learning paths, workshop, videos, blogs, etc. And your boy actually just finished one. So if we search for GraphQL, getting started with Spring for GraphQL, if you want to get started with Spring for GraphQL, hey, there's this nice little guide here that kind of walks you through how to do that. So these guides are really
Uh,
great. Whole bunch of, I mean, there's just a ton of them on here too. Almost too many. But yeah, some really great stuff over there. And I'll echo what DaShaun said. You really have to kind of put this in practice. Just burning through videos and books without kind of reapplying it is never gonna help. So that's why I do really like the guides. Like, it focuses on one thing. How do I get started with Spring for GraphQL? You go through it, you follow along, you do it yourself. Usually that helps, like, click. Oh, okay, that's exactly why I needed to do it, and this is how I do it. So
We have a comment that sounds exciting, but I'm still trying to learn Spring 5 and Boot 2.5. Things need to slow down to wait for me. I can say that you are going to be pleasantly surprised at how easy it is to migrate from Spring 5 to Spring Boot 3, or from Spring 5 to Spring Framework 6, and from Spring Boot 2.x to 3.x. It's going to be, I think, fairly easy, and you'll be pleasantly surprised. Another good question.
Oh, I was going to go with the comment real quick because there are several good courses on Udemy. You can usually get them on sale for $10 to $20. I have a couple of them on there. Shameless plug.
That's great to know. That's great to know. And another question there. What are the prospects for Kotlin as a primary language for Spring Boot and backend stuff? I don't know if there's a primary and secondary, perhaps, but I think Kotlin is fully supported.
It's one of the languages when you're on start.spring.io, you can choose Java, Kotlin, or Groovy. So one of those will work right out of the box. Really just depends on, if that's your primary language, great. Like you don't, just use that.
Go with what you know.
Yeah, for sure.
You don't have to change languages. You don't have to change it. Just keep going. Do the stuff you know. Excellent. Cool, so, and later we got some other stuff coming. I'm also a big fan of Spring Shell and all the things that it can do. I like to combine Spring Shell with the Spring Native and all the things that we're going to get in Spring Framework 6 and Spring Boot 3. I like to use Spring Shell to compile my own CLIs for the things that I'm going to do across a lot of my projects. I like to use Spring Shell and make my own CLI to make it super fast so I can do all the things.
Yeah, and it is actually, I'm just trying to find a link here, make sure I'm on the right one, which I am. It is the foundation for one of my new favorite tools in the Spring experimental world, which is the Spring CLI. And it's kind of built on, where are we here? It's kind of built on Spring Shell. So we have Spring Shell moving to 2.1.1. But this Spring CLI adds a whole bunch of really cool stuff. I've seen our friend Mark give a presentation on it before, and it's still experimental, but it's something that's going to hopefully get a little bit closer to maybe something that's GA later this year. I don't want to hold anyone on the team to that, but those are some hopes. Just a really cool CLI to kind of generate some code for some application. While the Spring Initializer kind of bootstraps an application, doesn't really do code generation. The CLI can kind of add some of that code generation in there. So, and it has like really nice templates, and you can contribute templates, which I have to it. And so if you want to say, hey, start me a new GraphQL project, not only does it give you all the bits, but it kind of gives you a whole bunch of starting code too, which is nice. So some cool stuff with Spring CLI, again, built on Spring Shell, and Spring Shell has a new version here, 2.1.1.
Yeah. Another good question from Niha. Are there going to be any streaming for what's being changed in Spring Boot 3? I heard whole REST API annotation is going to change. Is that true? What are key changes? One of the other things that we want to do here in the office hours is we want to give you some insight into what is changing. Let's go over those change logs. And what we're going to try to do more and more is bring in the leads for those different projects. Perhaps the Spring Web. Have them come in and explain, here's the things that are changing, and give you a chance to ask questions from that team.
Yeah, I think what we'll do too is, I'll put this down as a kind of a to-do. As we get closer and closer to Spring Boot 3, Spring Framework 6, we'll divide each of those. We'll have multiple shows, obviously. Can't cover everything that's new in one show. So we'll kind of pick a theme, like Spring Native for one show, GraphQL for another show, moving to Java 17 for another show, all the different themes that we have, observability, everything. And we'll kind of break those into different shows. And that way we could show off, just a few demos here and there of what's coming new. So I don't know of any REST API annotations that are changing off the top of my head. So I'll have to look into that. There are, maybe you had that confused with the declarative HTTP clients, which is
Yes,
funny that you
that's
bring
where
that
my head
up
went.
because that is the demo I'm going to show off today. So
Yes, the
we will
system
take a look at
works.
that. System works. Yep.
Yes, and another comment here, Spring Shell will probably play very well once Spring 6 is out with support for Spring Native. I think it
Mhm.
may be still possible to get the current Spring Shell with Spring Native and or GraalVM. VM. That is true. 100% you can use Spring Shell with the experimental dependency Spring Native and get all of that super fast compiled for uh, native binaries today. Yes, indeed.
Cool. So that's the calendar. Another thing I like to look at here is the Tanzu Developer Center blog. So you'll find a lot of our content. The DevRel team, different engineers on the Spring team. We're all kind of posting content here. So I just wanted to take a look at a couple highlights. If you don't know about A Beautiful Podcast yet, you should definitely check that out. Um, Josh just had Dr. Venkat on, who is famous in our world, and really good conversation between them two. I know they're really good friends. Another podcast that Josh had on was Jonathan Ivanov from the observability team, which, funny enough, I just saw Jonathan on yesterday with Nate on Between Chair and a Keyboard. So Jonathan's all over the place right now. So you can definitely check him out. So those were two really good interviews. I know
He's
this
awesome.
isn't
I'm a
a
fan.
Java thing, but if you work in the .NET world at all, our coworker Layla posted a good blog post on RabbitMQ. So even if you're not in the .NET world, this was kind of a good
Mhm.
introduction to what RabbitMQ is. But she walks you through what a message broker is, what a topic exchange is, and how to kind of hook that up in the .NET world. So
Yeah, and I
again,
think the concepts from that
yeah.
blog, if
Mhm.
you're interested in going down that path and you're getting into messaging, event-driven, uh, you're going to find a lot of that is really easy to do with Spring. So
Yep.
definitely a blog post worth reading.
Yep. So cool. Check out the developer center here. Again, we talked about some other things on there. And then again, shameless plug. I write a newsletter every week or two, depending on how busy I am. Really, if I have anything to write on. So I wrote on KCDC this week. I talked about my fun travel plans. If you don't follow me on Twitter, I spent the first day of my travel to KCDC basically in the airport from 10 a.m. and I got to KC at 1:15 a.m. to my hotel. So that was a lot of fun. But I also had some info in there on the presentation that I gave. Again, that was with my friend Nate Shuda. We talked about Spring Recipes, a collection of common sense solutions. So if you want to check out the GitHub repo for that and the slides. Yeah, I just saw, again, I put my thoughts in there on Kansas City. Great food, great people. Yeah, and it's, it's funny, and you already know this, but like it's funny when people like from California or Florida or something come to the Midwest and they're like, oh, like everybody's so friendly. Like you and I just know that. I mean, I'm claiming Ohio as the Midwest, but we're kind of in that same gray area. But yeah, it's just like people in Ohio, like when you walk up to someone and say hi, like they say hi to you. They don't do that in California. Like, why are you talking to me? So yeah, everybody was just like really friendly in KC, which was awesome.
Arigato, thank you for joining. We're glad that
Oh,
you're here.
nice. Oh, and then I have one more thing. I noticed a few things. I like to think I'm getting better at presenting live now that we're back to it again. I've been doing this a long time, but when you take a 2-year hiatus, like you forget things. And over the course of the year, I picked up a few things. And so, really quick, I just wanted to share a couple tips with everyone who might be giving presentations. This one's kind of specific to in person, but a lot of these like are whether you're in person or doing a live stream or doing a YouTube. And actually, I didn't even take my own tips today because I don't think. Oh yeah, do not disturb is on. So, really quick, I noticed this through like a couple conferences that I've been at this summer. Your number one job as a speaker, I think, is to be prepared. And the way that you can do that is, every talk I've given has not been perfect. Like I make as many mistakes as the next person. But if they're asking you to speak for an hour, you should try and get close to an hour. Now I get it. You get nervous, you talk fast, you talk slow. That happens. And I've done that plenty of times. But when you talk fast, like you should come under 10 minutes, 5 minutes. You shouldn't finish 20 minutes into an hour talk. I'm not calling out anyone on this. I'm just saying, like, I've noticed like people like finishing early. And it's like, to me, that's your number one job. Run through your material. If you think that you're going to be nervous and talk fast, have something that you can always gravitate or pull in that may not be a part of your original presentation. So I finished 10 minutes early. Oh, I have this one other thing that I can talk about if I need to. Thoughts on that?
That's excellent. Excellent stuff. I can talk for hours.
Yes. You and Nate have no problems. You guys can throw up one slide and talk for an hour.
let's talk about that slide. Those 5 words.
The rest of us can't.
How does that make you feel?
Something else I noticed. So I'm going to combine these two. Like, check out your room before you talk in dark mode. I went into the room that I was going to speak in, and you kind of get like a lay of the land, like what your room looks like, how's the lighting, are they recording the sessions, what microphones are they giving you, what is the podium situation, and those are things that you need to check out based on what you're doing. And then right away I noticed like everyone was using dark mode in their editors, and these are well lit rooms. And so if you're going to do that, like that, I know you prefer dark mode, but your audience can't like see everything then. And so I feel like that is something you need to be very cognizant of. Like if you want to continue to use that, fine, just go to the AV people and say, hey, can you turn the lights down? It's a little bit too bright in here. I luckily didn't have any live coding in this session. If I did, I would have been in really big trouble because I had these small podiums with these angled podiums, and like I can't type on those. Like I can live code for an hour if you want me to, but not on that. So if that's the case, if you do have live coding, I know we did it for Josh. Hey, can we get a table in here? Because I'm not going to code on this. So that is part of being prepared. Check out your room before you talk. If there are things that are not going to work for you, just make sure you get them figured out early. And now if you're the first person to talk, then, get there real early.
Good stuff. I was the first person to talk. I was not comfortable in the little podium that we just talked about. And and I had some technical difficulties. Tough. There was nobody in the room to help out with that at that time, but still good stuff all the way around.
And then just last couple things, speaker rooms. There are speaker rooms. If you're new to speaking, there are speaker rooms where you can go prepare, take advantage of them. Because you need a quiet place to like get your head straight or go over your slides again, take advantage of that. Make yourself a checklist. So if you are going to be presenting live streaming, creating a YouTube video, make checklists for each of those. So these are just the things off the top of my head. I actually have different checklists for each, but things like turn on do not disturb on your computer so you're not getting notifications. Make sure your screen resolution is right. Make sure your phone is out of sight, out of mind. You don't want that distracting you. If you have an Apple Watch, take it off. You don't need it for the presentation. That can distract you as well. If I need any browser windows that I am going to get into, have those open. If I'm live coding, maybe that first project is open so people don't have to watch me fumble through that. Make sure your sound is off. Make sure your clicker works. The slides are open. And if you're doing just slides only, make sure you're in presenter mode so you can have that detailed view of like presenter notes and what's coming next.
So I'm going to jump from this topic of presenting. We understand there's not a lot of people that are presenting, and people that are going to come to office hours are probably not presenting at a conference today or tomorrow. So we get it. But I will say, one of the questions we had earlier was, what's the best way to get to know this? Spring. How do I do that?
Yeah.
I know, and I think you'll agree, that one of the best ways to learn something is to teach it. So
it's true.
I take that as let's jump off of this. The points that you just went through, that expertise, that guidance, I want when I'm presenting something at a conference or online virtually, I want you, the audience, I want you to take what we've presented and I want you to feel like you can consume it. And I would love for you to take that back to your organization and share it with the people that didn't see the show, that
Yeah.
didn't get to go to the conference. This is a massive way for you to kind of share what you're learning with your organization. If you find something that's valuable to you, you find one of those magical recipes that does amazing things with 2 lines of code, take that and share it back with the rest of your team and use
Lunch
those
and learns.
practices. Yep.
Lunch and learns are a great way to do that. And that is like the best way to get started speaking, because, like you said, you can take something, learn something, and then teach it back to like somebody you're comfortable being around. It's just a bunch
Mhm.
of coworkers that you've had interactions with already, and they're just there to like hang out and learn something new from you. So
Yep.
yeah, great
Or
way to learn stuff.
you have the Developer Center blog.
Yeah.
Take that, consume it, put it into your words. We also mentioned earlier the idea that there's a lot of different ways to explain something. There's no unique message, only a unique messenger. Like, put it into your words, because the way that you explain something might be exactly what somebody else needs. And
Yep.
by doing that, going through that exercise, I'm confident that you're going to understand whatever the topic is better.
Yep. Cool. Do you want me to go through a demo?
Let's go into a demo. If there's no questions, let's jump into a demo.
All right. One more question here, I think. Make sure you have really good food so people will be busy eating,
Too
too
busy.
busy eating to mock you. Also, make sure you don't have food present that is easy to throw. Great tips. Great tips. I like it.
I
All
think
right.
he was looking at me.
Let
Or she. Yeah.
me hide this. And so, what I'm going to talk about again is from our presentation. Let
These
me kind of
recipes.
jump into this presentation and just go down to one of them. Yeah, so I think this was the idea. Nope, that's not going to work. We're just going to look at the slide. So this was kind of the format that we used. The problem was, hey, I need to create a client to call another service. So if you're in an application and you're in a controller or a service or some class, and you need to be able to make a call to another API, maybe this is a service that you stood up, maybe this is a service that's like a public API. How do you do that? And I get this question a lot. So there are many solutions to this problem. You can use one in Java. There's a Java HTTP client if you're using Java 11 or further. In Spring, you have access to a couple of things, the REST template and the web client. So the REST template is typically used in like a Spring MVC application because it is blocking. The web client is used in kind of reactive world. It is non-blocking. Then in Spring Framework 6 and Spring Boot 3, you'll have access to declarative HTTP clients. So this demo was just to kind of show, I wonder if we went into anything else. Yeah, we went into this, but I'm going to actually look at the code. And so let's just start off with a Spring MVC application. So here in my Spring MVC application, in my main app, I'm just creating a new bean of type REST template. So I have this bean that I can now use throughout the application. If I go to my controller, I can go ahead and get this auto-wired in for me through constructor injection. So now I have access to this REST template. And this REST template, if you're not sure what it is, if you go ahead and click in here, and if you're never sure what a class is, in IDEs like IntelliJ, you can just kind of click through and like read the documentation. So this is a synchronous client to perform HTTP requests, exposing a simple template method API, underlying the HTTP client libraries, like whatever the different libraries are. So it's really just an API to make HTTP calls, right? So one of those methods in the REST template is this get for object. So I have this public API that allows us to get a random coffee picture. And so this coffee model really just has an ID and then a string for file. That's what that random coffee returns. So I can use the REST template to call out to this and just get a random coffee. And we expose this on a get mapping on /random. So when we fire this application up, if we go to /API/coffee/random, we should get that random coffee. So let's see if that works. And we are there. And if we go to, oops, localhost 8080, and then /API/coffee/random. And we get this random file, and that's just a random image for something that's coffee. So that works. Again, this is kind of the approach that you use in a Spring MVC application. Then we have a reactive application. So if we're using reactive Spring, Spring Web Flux, there is a web client. So web client, again, similar situation. We just create a new instance of this client. We're setting the base URI URL for this. So that's the base of it. We're setting a mapping here for random. And then we're using the web client to perform a get operation against this URI using this base. We're retrieving it. And then in the reactive world, we work with monos and fluxes. So we're turning this, whatever the body of that is that we get back, into a mono of type coffee. And so again, this will just do the same thing. I'm not going to run this one. It does exactly the same thing. So those are kind of your two options building applications today. If I jump into this one, in Spring Framework 6 and Spring Boot 3, so if you see here, I'm using Spring Boot 3.0 milestone 4. And in milestone 4, we can do something that looks like this. So this boilerplate to kind of get this glued together is something that you still need to do in the milestones. From everything that I know, some of this may go away, this ceremony, and you won't have to do this. You'll just have to declare the client. But right now, we have to kind of put this boilerplate in here. So again, we create a web client because the declarative HTTP clients use web client underneath the hood. And you create a service factory. You do some after properties set, and then you create a client based on the client that that I'll show you now. So the ultimate idea here is you just create an interface. So we're calling this a coffee client, and you define the different methods that you want available on this. And so the coffee client has a base, right? This is just the URI of that. So you create this method called random that is going to return a coffee. And you use these annotations, get exchange, post exchange, etc. And that will know that, hey, it basically needs to make a get HTTP call on the base URL plus this URI that we've provided here. So now that you have that, you can go into your coffee controller here and say, hey, give me an instance of that client. At runtime, Spring will turn that into an actual implementation for you. Now you have this coffee client, and all you need to do in your controller here is say, hey, let me call that random message. And now that random message will call out to whatever service we've defined there and return that image again. So the idea of declarative HTTP clients is nothing new. We have them in the Spring world already with things like Spring Cloud Sleuth. There's also another project, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, that uses it. But this is not the new, but this is once we get some of that boilerplate code out of the way, this is a really easy way to just say, hey, I have a client that is going to talk to some other service, and I'm just going to declare this interface and the methods that I need along with their request method, right? So really cool stuff coming in Spring Boot 3 and Spring Framework 6. If you want to learn more about this, there is a really good talk. I don't have a link now, but I will include it in the show notes below. OpenFeign, maybe. I thought it was something to do with, I can't remember. I'll look for it. I will include a link for a talk that I saw from Spring IO earlier this year. Olga, who's on the Spring team, did a talk on this. Really great talk, kind of goes more in depth on this. So I'll make sure to get that information out. But yeah, that's it.
Yeah. one of the other pieces, um, documentation. We have seen quite a bit of the Open API spec from Swagger and all the things that it can do. And I'm currently still, my preference is Spring REST docs. I like Spring REST docs because I can build my documentation from my tests. And that helps me make sure that my documentation is always up to date and it's always working. And I still get some of the benefits that I get from that Open API spec. I can still execute code and I can still generate that documentation. But right now, that's where I'm at. I really like that I could use ASCII Docker to generate those docs and again, generate my documentation from those tests. And there is Spring REST docs has some great examples in it. Maybe I should pull that up while you're pulling that up. And yeah, just talk about it real quick if I can.
Yeah, sorry, I was just trying to remember. I'm looking to see if I could find that other project. I hate when
Here, I just
you know
pulled
them.
down Spring Projects, Spring REST docs, and it's got some great samples in it. And I opened up this REST notes for Spring Data REST. And in there, I can see that my API documentation is getting generated from my tests. So all of this goes, it's going to run the test just like normal. So I'm not adding anything extra. I'm just saying, hey, when I run this test, I want to keep that and want to throw it into my documentation. So I can have my overview, my examples, and I can include the results from the tests that I'm running and the output. Very similar, very yeah, common. I won't be able to share the screen because it's on a different screen, but it gives you.
Oh, are you there, or did we lose DaShaun, or is it me?
Hello,
Oh,
there we go.
there you are. Oh, I hear you now.
Oh wait, you didn't hear me?
Nope, I didn't know if it was me or you. So
All right. Well, it might have been. This is just an example of the output that I can get using Spring REST docs, and I'm a big fan. I always have been, and right now I'm just in that spot where, yep, I'm going to lean into this a little bit more because I'm enjoying the way that it generates my documentation. That's all I wanted to share. Spring REST docs. It's just another project
there's a
that we
question
like.
here. Does Spring REST docs work with REST Assured?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Cool.
So yeah, run your tests, validate your docs, deliver your docs with each release. That's a nice pattern. Oh, we missed it. We missed the whole thing. Oh, that's no good.
No,
Uh,
I caught a lot of it.
okay.
There was just like a little piece that cut out for me, so I don't know if that was.
Spring REST docs. Take a look.
I think
I'll
DaShaun was
throw.
just showing the generated output. And that's really
Yeah,
nice looking.
I'll throw this in there. Take a look. There's some good samples. Get your docs with your tests. That's the key.
You write tests? That's great.
I I I like writing tests.
Yeah,
I really
no, it
do.
is. It is so important.
So my talk at KCDC was about how easy it is to live in this multi-cloud world, this multi-data center, multi-region, whatever you're doing. The talk was "My kids will never deploy active passive." Just the idea that I can start developing with something like Spring Data Redis on my laptop, and I can validate, hey, things are working. And as I grow, maybe my startup or whatever the application is, as it grows and as it demand increases and its value increases, I can easily take that same application and I can deploy it to something like Azure Spring Apps along with Azure Cache for Redis Enterprise, and I can then have this multi-cloud active deployment of a simple application using Spring as the backend. The idea simply was just how easy is it that we can take the same app? I don't have to do anything to go from working on my laptop to working in active deployment. The code stays the same. The changes are all injected with Spring, and it's just super simple. I had to make 0 changes to the code in order to go from my laptop to an active deployment, and it was magic. I liked it. Not magic. It was powerful, and it's easy. It's 2022, and if you're deploying, yeah, into a multi-region or multi-data center, yeah, think about going active. We've been doing this for a while, and there's a lot of ways to do it. It doesn't have to be Redis. There's tons of options.
Yeah, you got a lot of really good questions at the end of your talk too. People dealing with petabytes of data. Which
Yeah,
is
how do I do
blows my
active
mind.
with 50 petabytes of data?
Right. Cool.
So we had some good demos. We talked about what's on the calendar. Now's the time where we like to make sure that everybody's questions are getting answered. So if you've got any questions, what are you working on? What are you stuck with? Let us know, and let's see if we can help.
Yeah, and even if it's not a simple question to answer, maybe it's something, we are content creators. If it's something that we can create a piece of content on that may help you and others, this is a great place to let us know that
What would you
is
like to
missing.
see?
Yeah.
What would you like to see? Yeah. Is there a blog or a pattern that you'd like to have some more insight into? Let us know. This is your chance. We're happy to help. And if
What's
not, if there's
what's
no
DaShaun
questions,
always
I'm going
say?
to ask. Yeah,
What's DaShaun
if
always
you
say?
leave
If you,
dinner hungry, that's your fault. Yes.
Exactly.
You got to bring your questions. We are here at your service. And I can also, I can assign homework. I think that everybody here has, well, hopefully, can find some time to take the latest milestone of Spring Boot 3. Take it for a spin. See what works, see what doesn't. Let us know. There's tons of changes. We get to see a little bit behind the scenes on how hard everybody's working and how amazing the results are so far. So take it for a spin. See what you can get working and let us know. That's a big part of this open source community that we're in. A lot of times, and I know I was guilty of it in the past, waiting for that general available release to come before I started using it. And now I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum. I like taking things early. I like seeing where things are not complete, not working, and giving my feedback. And I love it even more when those things work with a later release. So the things that didn't work in milestone 1 that are now working in milestone 4, that's exciting. And I got to see it. I got to see the progress in that short window between those 2 releases.
Yeah. I think this is a good time for those people who want to get started with Spring Boot to remind everyone, if you don't know, Spring 1 is going to be happening December 6th through 8th, 2022 in San Francisco. We are back in live in person. And a couple people here are giving a workshop on getting started with Spring Boot. So as you can see here, getting started with Spring Boot, instructors Dan Vega and DaShaun Carter. So I'm really looking forward to this.
Awesome.
Oh, it's gonna be so much fun. I've already started putting some ideas in my head as to what this is, kind of like a lay of the land of what we want to cover. It's always one of the more popular workshops at Spring 1. There'll be a lot of people there. We get to help a lot of people. I'm really excited about that. So we'll start sharing more as we start putting together. Like I said, I just kind of started working on some of the outline now. As we get closer, we'll start sharing some more details about what we're going to cover there. But a couple 2-hour talks, workshops on that. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
Good questions coming in. First one from Benjamin. Any resources on JPA? Struggling to understand the entity graphs. What I would like to do here is I'd like to refer you to our last episode 9, where we had Greg Turnquist, and he covered a great deal across everything Spring Data. and all of the different ways that you can access your data. Spring Data JPA, Spring Data JDBC, plus the different connectors that we have, different starters for the different databases.
Yeah,
Take a look at that.
I think based on that conversation too, he also put out a article on JDBC versus JPA. So if you're kind of struggling to understand like the difference at a high level, like what they each are, this was a really good article that he put out. So I'll be sure to include both of those in the show notes. But yeah, what was the? Oh, I thought that was the same one. Those are some good resources. Again, there's some guides on getting started with JPA on the Developer Center. I would say if you have a more specific question, if you take both of those resources and you say, I'm really lost on this, like I usually it's one to many, many to one, many to many. Like I can't figure out like how this works in my mind or how this maps from those annotations. Bring those specific questions here and maybe we'll put together a demo on that. There's another question. I would like to ask about Spring Starter versus non-starter JPA JDBC dependencies. I see the starter one creates the Hikaru CP on startup and the non-starters create it lazily. Any idea why? So I'm not, when you say non-starter, so if I go to start.spring.io and I pick JPA or JDBC, I'm getting that Spring Boot data starter JDBC or JPA. What is the other dependency that what dependency are you including if you're not including that? I guess is my question. Because I think the starter is the way to go, right? The starter does all the things that we want it to do. It includes all the right dependencies. It does all the auto configuration. Makes these these configurations available to you. So I would choose the starter over the other one. I'm not sure. The answer is no. I don't know the difference, but I can look into that.
I think the difference here might be the dependencies that we provide for Spring Boot and Spring Cloud. Those starters, those are for your things that are going to run in container. And again, I'm jumping here. That hey, we're going to start up as we start that container, and we're going to provide health around that, like a health check endpoint, and provide that to the health check for our actuator, etc. But we also have these other dependencies that we deliver that aren't for a Spring Boot app that's going to run in a container, your desktop application, etc. You might not want that connection to be started automatically, right, at runtime. It's not a microservice. It's not doing that type of data. So I think that's the high level. Like those are some of the differences why you might start up automatically versus not. Hopefully that helps.
Are you using an M1 Mac? Yes, I am, and I love it. It's the best machine I've ever owned.
I have one downstairs, but downstairs is under construction. So this is not an M1, but I'm a big fan of the M1. But the reason I use the M1 is so that I can have more fun with my Raspberry Pis. I'm all about that ARM64 vibe. I live that ARM64 life.
Cool. Great questions, though.
Hey, is Spring IO going to be physical only this year? Or Spring 1? I think we, on the CFP, we have virtual or physical.
No.
I'm not
so
sure.
There are no virtual speakers. I don't know if these presentations are going to be made available. That's something I'll have to ask about. But from a speaker standpoint, there are no virtual speakers this year. Everyone is in person. I know that for a fact.
But yeah, can we access that data, those presentations virtually? Great question. We'll try to get that answer.
Yeah.
SAP. Yes. Yeah, go with the starters. Simplify your life. And if you've got questions or if you're running into problems with one versus the other, bring those back. Let us see if we can help you. One of the other things that we've done on earlier episodes is we are happy to take where you're at and go with you on your journey. Like, let us know where you're at. We'll pair virtually, or we'll give you an example. Whatever you're working on, we're here to help. We're at your service. Another question: Spring Boot logging confuses me. Some changes to property files don't seem to activate. Any tips?
Um, yeah, it would really
Depends.
depend on what you're trying to change.
Yep.
Um,
Understanding which dependencies are being included, what's included by default, and making sure you're making changes to the right logger.
yeah, let me open something real quick. So we had a couple of problems and solutions in our presentation
You did.
for Spring Recipes around getting started with kind of logging, and so I can show you something there. So let me take that off. So I will say, if you right out of the box, if you include something like Spring Web, so if you go into Spring Boot Starter Web, if you look at the dependencies for that, you'll see Spring Web, Spring MVC. I think Spring Boot Starter includes some of the logging stuff, so auto configuration, and then there's a Spring Boot Starter logging. So basically, out of the box, you get some of this logging for free, right? Which means, like in a normal Java application, you have to go in and kind of set this stuff up. So this allows you to come in and do something like this, or use something like Lombok. So I could say, hey, give me a logger. I think I had a better example in the main application. So if you wanted to do something like this, let me just say, so this, I wanted to come in and say log.info, hello, Spring office hours. So if I do that and I go ahead and run this, we know that we got that logger out of the box. And oh, do we not have something configured? Let's build this. This doesn't seem like it is ready to go. Huh, something's going on here. I know it when I loaded it up, it gave me a weird error. So without getting into this, let me just show you something. So we have this logger, we log this info. When you say it won't allow me to activate any tips, so I'm wondering if in your application.properties, like, are you trying to change the logging level? So if you're changing the logging level, like by default, I'm only going to show like info, warning, error, not debug, right? So if I go in and I say, hey, if I wanted to change like the logging level for root to debug, that will show for everything. But when you do that, that's going to bring in debug for every logger in the system. So this is also the framework stuff. So you're going to get a lot of noise in there. So if you wanted to just say, hey, for anything under dev.danvega, you can say dev. So you can say the level for dev.danvega is debug, right? So this is changing the logging level for a specific logger. Now, this is if you got to find out what logger you're trying to change. You could do it just for like an entire package, just for like a very specific class. So this is what you want to play around. And the biggest thing to do there is, if my application was actually running, I don't know why it's not running. Let's do this real quick. Terminal. Nothing wants to run. When your like project runs and you have all those like console outputs down there, it's going to show you the log message, but it also shows you the logger, like the exact class that it's logging from, maybe a package or a specific class. So you can always look at those and go, oh, I see what is getting logged there. So those are some things to check out. And then on the other side of that, it might be an environment thing. So you may be logging one level in one environment like dev. You may be running in another environment where you don't have that specific log level set. So check locally first. If it's not a local thing and it's another environment thing, then you may have multiple versions of properties that are getting overridden or something like that.
And if you're using the actuator, you can actually make some changes in real time to adjust logging for debugging purposes or whatever. I did put a link to the latest version of the logging for string boot. Hopefully that helps. And Winston, thanks for joining. That was a great question. I need to wrap up. We'll be back soon. So yeah, hopefully this was valuable. We want you to come back and join us. Bring your questions. We're here at your service. Dan, any final words?
No, that's it. Looking forward to the next one. Probably, we never know what the next one is. I'm gonna probably say next week, but we will come back with some
Maybe
more.
Sooner. We'll see.
What's new? Some demos and
an example of logging
and
how to change it in real time. Winston,
Sweet.
bring your questions.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Winston.
Wonderful.
All right. Appreciate everyone. We'll see you in the next one. Have a good one.
Take care.